I will be talking about coffee, and later I will tell you why this is relevant. I love coffee. How many of you had some coffee today? Raise your hand. All right. And how many of you go to like fancy, good coffee shops, but not Starbucks, like pumpkin something, right? The real coffee shops where people are obsessed with coffee. Okay. So in these places you will find people called baristas, right? And these are very interesting people. When they get a type of coffee, they do something which is called dialing in, and they use 5 parameters to get the most out of the single coffee type. And these are grind size, the amount of coffee that goes into the machine, the amount of coffee you want to get out as a liquid, that's called ratio, and there are 2 more, water pressure and water temperature. And when they are dialing in the coffee, so they're trying, they're tasting it, and then they're moving on, if they get to a nice place, they only change a single parameter for the next trial. And if you ask them why, they would say, like, if I change 2 or 3 parameters and I'm quite close, how do I know what worked and what didn't? And this is kind of relevant when you think, sprint review, last feedback, that was awful, like that was a waste of time. And so you immediately go for a retrospective and you have brainstorming, and it's like 5 excellent action items to work on the next one. And then you figure out, you've applied them all. 2 weeks later, it was awful again, but in a new, unique way. Because if you don't have the ways to figure out what worked and what didn't, you might end up in a blender that doesn't tell you a thing. You might have optimized one thing by 50% and then lose it with next 2 actions, right? The other thing with coffee, if you're talking about coffee extraction, you put a lot of work to extract coffee. So it's actually boiling the water, putting the pressure on, so it's work. And if you put the work in, the taste goes up, 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 and suddenly it drops. So this is the moment you kind of should stop brewing this coffee because the tastes get worse. The first part is called under-extraction, and the next part is called over-extraction. Under-extraction gives you really awful acidic taste, and over-extraction gives you really awful bitter taste, all right? So there's a sweet spot, and I'll say, this looks exactly like problems with quality over engineering, right? And there's another thing, a bit down to earth example. Let's say 8 people coming to your house. You've got the manual coffee machine. Everybody's saying like, I'll have a cup of coffee. And then you're like, okay. You're doing the coffee, it's manual work, and then you put a tray on. You've done 8 coffees, all right? You put them all on a tray. You're trying to get the coffee to people, and then you trip over. You knock out 3 of the coffees, but then you still have 5 coffees, right? So at least 5 people will be fine with that. And you give it to them, and they say like, cold coffee, lovely, right? So this is a bit like, if you've only spent a tiny bit of time after every single coffee, you could have delivered warm coffee to every single of your guests and not trip over, possibly, like the possibility was a lot lower. So this is what kind of, it was mentioned all around the conference. It looks exactly the way that we ship our products, right? And why I'm talking about coffee and trying to find examples, I think it's great to be here today and just do and listen to everybody, but you don't need to wait another year to get your examples. Like, world, people, and nature is very good in optimizing itself, so just seek, look around you, search for examples. There are processes that work, and there are processes that naturally fail. and it's easy to map them to our day-to-day work. Thank you.